Hello, everyone. I am Timothy Grant. I pretty much am a game designer, but I also own Gaming Approaches Towards Education. It's a therapeutic practice in New Jersey where we use tabletop gaming, but we have also included fandoms and geekdom lately, where we've expanded our horizons here, thanks to Shelby here, who has put this lovely presentation together for us. Shelby?
So while I go ahead and introduce myself as well, thank you all for coming. I do want to go ahead and just show of hands anyone who didn't get the surveys. I know we were kind of going around. Okay, Tim, would you be able to go pass out some surveys? Or that works? Ah, see, that's great. That's wonderful. So my name is Shelby Summers. I am a licensed social worker in New Jersey. I also work for Gaming Approaches Towards Education. I've been there for about 2 years now. I am one of our therapists, as well as I sometimes side hustle and do presentations like this. So today we are going to be kind of talking about fandoms, identity, and how to incorporate that into therapeutic approaches, right? It's really easy to think about that as just sort of rapport, tell me what you like, that kind of stuff, but sometimes it can go beyond that. We can look at stories, look at narratives, look at things that really connect to an individual and help us understand the world that they're in and the world that they perceive, and it can be a really great way to kind of invite that into the therapeutic approach and everything. So I just kind of wanted to start a little bit of, like, obviously we're here at Save Against Fear. We're, nerds of some kind. What are some fandoms that we have represented here today? I'm wearing Totoro, so. What you got?
Kingdom Hearts.
Kingdom Hearts, nice. Any other fandoms?
That's gotta be Disney.
Disney, definitely.
I can't think of anything.
Yeah,
Marvel?
you might be in the wrong place, sir. I'm not sure. There was another conference further down that maybe there were maps or something.
That was too far.
So just as kind of some learning objectives, the idea here today is to kind of be able to not only understand a little bit about fandoms, obviously we all may come from different walks and kind of have our different understandings, but just sort of getting a foundation of what we're even talking about here. It's really weird to think, but even sports and stuff like that, they are fandoms. Like, they get bigger conventions and just make fun of people who go to Comic-Con, but same stuff. So being able to have those ideas of what that looks like and how that goes ahead and gets incorporated. Also being able to look at how fandoms are a part of identity, whether it be ways that we explore our own self, or also the cultures that we ascribe to, the ones that we connect with, how we go ahead and kind of fit our place in the world, right? Kind of finding our place amongst the misfits, that kind of idea, and how to be able to go ahead and, use characters, archetypes, narratives, things like that incorporated into the practices that we do. And finally, being able to kind of walk away with a couple different things that we can use in our actual practice with individuals or even just sort of with ourselves. So, to kind of kick us off is just a little bit about fandoms and geek culture. So, we all know. Okay. Yeah, a little bit. So just to kind of kick us off, geek culture is definitely something that was originally much more of a subculture, right? For a very long time, much more underground, much more off to the side, things like that. Dungeons and Dragons, having all of the different kinds of things that, fall under that. In more recent years, it has definitely become much more mainstream. You can go to any mall, find a Hot Topic, find a box lunch. You can go on Etsy and find a million wonderful, fantastic things. It's terrible for my wallet, but wonderful as a person. And so being able to look at how we are able to not only have representation, but to also walk into a room and show to other people, this is a part of me. This is something that matters to me. This is something I chose, and it's not just for fashion shows. But being able to go ahead and look at that. Obviously, we had things like the Marvel movies that became a really, really huge cultural phenomenon. You figure people who had never picked up a comic book were going to the movies to go see the Marvel superheroes because it was action-packed and fun. And then we slowly started putting in all the side characters who it's like, really deep which comics they were from. And so being able to kind of incorporate things that way, being able to have it be more accepted, having it be more accessible. Also in the realm of anime, right? We used to have really, really awful dubs, like the 4Kids TV dubs and things like that, because there was this whole idea that anime was only for children, so we did get the Pokemon rap, so I guess that's kind of a win. I'm also a fan of the pirate rap, but, that can be decisive sometimes. But anyway, so now we do have it much more accessible. We have actual, anime that we can get pretty good localized subs, as well as really great dub voice casting. You have voice actors who are sometimes more famous than real actors, at least amongst all of us. So being able to have it just be accessible. Manga can be found in your Barnes & Noble, at your local libraries. It is much easier to go ahead and get your access. We're not having to go scour the internet to find one-off really bad dub that somebody kind of tried to do for themselves. And yeah, we're not living in those dark ages anymore.
Oh, I think those were the best.
They certainly can be. But so obviously things have gotten much more accessible, and so that has led to kind of an exploration of geek culture. Also looking at fandoms and community, you figure we have had all kinds of things spring up. We have Twitch, Tumblr, Webtoons, TikTok, Discord. There's a million of them. I can't name them all, but obviously getting to have these subcultures, these sub-communities where we can all connect, getting to go ahead and have places where we can go ahead, share ideas. I mean, obviously, there are some people from all over, right? I know, what is the furthest people have traveled? I know I came from New Jersey. Anyone further? What do you got? Atlanta? Okay. Anyone further?
California.
Ooh, can anyone top that? Probably not. That's a hard one to top. Unless you can give me a country, like, I was gonna say, like you.
Hawaii might count.
Hawaii or Alaska, I might count those.
I can't say anything.
So, we're able to go ahead, we're able to connect, we're able to go ahead and find, these sort of communities and connect in this way. Do you have stuff you want to also say about fandoms and community?
Fandoms and community, let's see. How many people here are a part of like a fandom community? What is it?
I mean, how many do you want me to talk about?
That's I love that answer.
The top 13.
The top 13. Oh, but that
This
does
is secretly your presentation.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, we could start with Revolutionary or Lieutenant fan sites, and we could talk all about back when there were like online shrines to characters. I mean, we go back to the live journal days before archiving our own.
I'm gonna go take a seat. Hold on. So, how many of you work with clients that have fandoms that you incorporate that into your practice? Are there fandoms that you don't know about that you've had to research? Yeah, that is usually the biggest problem, right? Is like we have someone who is really into a big fandom, and like, how do we learn about this fandom besides watching 500 episodes of an anime or whatever it is? Well, this is one of those ways. We go join a community and learn a little more by seeing what the community is offering, right? And then we can connect with our clients a little better.
Ed Fix and One Piece to the rescue.
Yeah, for sure.
So along with that idea is characters and connections, right? So all of us connect to characters for different reasons, whether it's the silent protagonist that we can really slip into, or the super just, tsundere one that totally doesn't want to be here, or anything like that, Having all of those characters, getting to go ahead and have them be something that maybe it is what we want to be, maybe it's what we see ourselves as. All of these characters live stories, and so we can connect to those. We can connect to the relationships they forge, the struggles they have. Even something like slaying a dragon can at least be like, wow, at least I'm not doing that. So being able to look at the ways that we can go ahead and kind of connect to these characters. And of course, I'm a social worker. A big thing for us is person and environment. That is our bread and butter. Any textbook you pick up, any test you take, pie everywhere, person and environment. So the idea here is that our environment goes beyond the rooms that we're in, the people that we're with, the spaces that we're taking up. Our environment is also what we consume, right? Parts of the culture that we consume, the media we consume, the things we interact with, because maybe my ideas of what high school would be like, what college would be like, are all formed by what I've read, what I've watched, what I've heard from other people, right? Stories have a lot of power, especially when we have no idea how these things actually are. And our brains like to try and be as prepared as possible for different situations. So the best it can do is latch on to whatever it's heard before. And that's where you get a lot of cases of kids really anxious to go to school because they expect to be bullied or shoved into lockers or things like that, because it's what they've seen. It's part of their environment. It's part of what they've gone ahead and experienced without actually experiencing it. We are here at SAVE, where tabletop role playing is a really big thing. We can experience whole worlds. I have never in my life cast magic, but when I play, I can be a wizard, and I can see what that's like. I can see what it's like to go ahead and get to interact at a tavern, which I've never been to except maybe at a Ren Fair, but you know, getting to go ahead and be immersed in those cultures, be immersed with those characters. And so really kind of just looking at how we go ahead and connect with that and how our clients connect with that. What kind of characters are they connecting with? Are they connecting with individuals who are always ostracized, always alone, always struggling? Or are they connecting with someone who is popular, someone who is the life of the party? Maybe it is someone who is going through struggles. Maybe they're reading a story about an individual who's closeted and they're trying to go ahead and express their own things through that. Being able to see what characters people connect with, and more importantly, not the meaning we assign to it, but the meaning they assign to it. It's really easy to be able to be like, oh, I've watched that anime, I totally know what it's about. Or I've watched that show, I've watched Wednesday Addams, I totally know what's going on here. It's harder to see what they know and what they pick up on.
I think the most important part about it is the why, right? Why are they connecting with these certain either characters or fandoms in general, right? Why is there a connection? And us knowing more about that fandom helps us learn a little more about the person that we're working with. I think that's like one of the most vital parts of all this, right?
Thank you for bearing with our awkward handoffs. So some common themes and tropes, right? We have the hero, the mentor, the rival, right? If you've taken any literature class ever, you know about the hero journey, right? It always has the same cycle all the time. And most film, television, TV shows are television. Film, television, books, games, they all follow the same idea. So having your tropes, right? Our brains love to go ahead and have things that they can hold on to kind of put things in boxes. Sometimes it's the right box, sometimes it's the wrong box, but we like to go ahead and have those things to kind of hang on to and say, okay, I've seen this before, I know what this looks like, this is what will happen, right? If I see someone who is the jerk, I know what to expect. Ooh, talking. So I know what to expect. I know that they're not suddenly going to go ahead and have a change of heart and like bring me puppies. Like, that's not what's happening. So sometimes we can go ahead and use that to our advantage. Sometimes we can take a character trope and we can turn it on its head. We can go ahead and, you know, have the jerk be someone who is suddenly seen the light and going to go ahead and do something different, be something different. Or sometimes we have characters who struggle against what others think of them, even though there's nothing pointing to that being true. You also have things like the rogue, the wizard, the knight, the bard, right? All of us know those kinds of archetypes. Obviously, you are not going to go ahead and have someone who is playing the rogue who's going to be like the happiest sunshine person. It just doesn't seem to happen. I would love to see it, but usually they like to hang out into a corner and have a really tragic backstory that they're definitely running away from and not going to talk about, unless you poke and prod a little bit where they'll kind of maybe just divulge all of it. But going ahead and having those archetypes can help us kind of see that, but can also help us break those barriers, because maybe I decide to be a rogue who has a perfectly happy family and nothing bad has ever happened to me. I just want to be a rogue. Like, that's how I want to do it. We also have, of course, if you are in the anime world, all of our deres, right? And so, you've got your tsundere that is prickly, combative, but they are secretly a marshmallow. It is deep, deep inside, but it's there. You also have your yandere, who looks sweet and nice, but they are very unhinged. If you have ever played Doki Doki Literature Club, you know who I'm talking about. We also have our kuderes, right? Our ones who are stoic, analytical, emotionless, but they are still secretly a marshmallow. That is a key factor here. You also have your dandere. They are quiet, timid, socially awkward, right? And then finally, you've got your dere. They are just sweet, energetic, and actually marshmallows. There's no question about it. And while this is not exhaustive, these tropes can kind of happen. You can see it all throughout, whether you pick Naruto, My Hero, Bleach, all of these kinds of things happen, and these characters often take up specific kinds of roles. Some are there to go ahead and kind of help explore emotions. Others are there to be whole entire energetic balls of emotion. So kind of being able to live out the stories through their experiences.
So one of my fandoms is role-playing games in general, right? I love role-playing games. I will play them always. But one of my favorite games to play and run for our groups is Kids on Bikes. And the reason I like Kids on Bikes is for the tropes. You can easily just read one of these tropes and instantly connect with a character you know. That is one of the strongest things for me when I'm running a game for a group, to be able to see what type of fandoms they're into. So if they pick a trope and I can start spouting out characters from different tropes that from different genres and fandoms that match that trope, and that could connect with you a little easier. It makes it easier for when we're running this group to know what you're looking for out of the play as well, right? So what are we looking to get out of this? I think it's an interesting way to think about it.
So continuing on with the idea of tropes, right? We have our different genres, right? Again, very basic, nothing groundbreaking. But the kinds of things that we go towards, the kinds of things that comfort us, can sometimes be indicators of what we're going through. If you've spent any time on the internet and you have dealt with any sort of, version of depression, there's this idea of the discomfort zone, where like horror, murder, true crime, all of those things feel really comfortable and safe, right? And so, being able to look at individuals who are connecting with those kinds of things, being able to look at someone who really connects with isekai, right? Fish out of water, I'm in a brand new place, I have no idea what's happening, and it's really easy to see those connections, to see how that might help us relate to the world, to what's going on, because maybe I'm in a school I've been in my whole life, maybe I'm not, but I still feel like a fish out of water. I feel like I'm definitely level 1 and everyone else is level 50. I don't know what's happening, right? I work with a lot of individuals who are on spectrum or ADHD or neurodiverse in some way, and a lot of times when we talk about social skills, conversation skills, the way that I often explain it is that it feels like everyone else has a script and I'm there doing improv. I'm just kind of doing things, seeing how people react, and kind of playing it off from there, trying to play yes and, but not always the greatest at it, whereas everyone else knows their places, knows their script, knows their lines. They even know the plot of the story, right? And so being able to understand what we connect with, what we go ahead and, see, and what we go ahead and interact with, so that we can understand how we even view our world. Maybe I really love just slice of life, things are easy, people are happy, because because I am living in a world that is not like that, and it is an idealistic version of what I may want or what I may be working towards. We also have like comedies, historical dramas. There are some people who just cannot handle the awkward that is often with comedies, right? So much of comedy is someone being in a really bad situation and just it being incredibly awkward. And for some people, that's incredibly uncomfortable. So really being able to follow their lead, right? Seeing what they interact with, what they connect with, and not going ahead and putting our own ideas or our own identities into this, while also recognizing that we have ours too. We have preconceived notions about things. We have our own ideas of what things look like. all of us can come from different cultural backgrounds. So being able to understand that my lived experience, no matter what the other person looks like, has been through, or anything like that, is inherently different because we are different people. So even if we like the same things, we like them in very different ways. And so that is a big part of following the client, right? It's a lot like a dance. They lead, we follow, and point things out along the way, right? I like to think of it sometimes too, like if you've been to Disney and done Jungle Cruise, I'm just the skipper. Sometimes I'll make jokes and you might laugh. So going along with that. So now for the big part, media and representation, right? Representation is a huge, huge part of this conversation because it's not just about who you see, it's a lot about who you don't, right? What isn't shown, what isn't given light, right? Whether it be different kinds of relationships, different people, right? Being able to go ahead and look at how characters are portrayed. If you have watched older anime, women are not always portrayed the best way, and it's really hard to find accurate representation. If you've played video games, armor is usually just a metal bra for reasons, and every vital part is exposed. So ironically enough, I can't just put chainmail there and be safe. Like, it doesn't work. So being able to look at not only who is represented, but who isn't. Also being able to look from the industry side too. Who is telling these stories? Who is a part of these conversations? You know, it's great to want to go ahead and try and give more representation, but is it accurate? Are we actually talking to the people who have these lived experiences? Are we actually going ahead and making sure they have seats at the table, right? Being able to go ahead and have those conversations. I know that in my personal experience working with individuals, TikTok has given rise to a lot of things. It is great, it is awful, all at the same time. I have had a lot of conversations with individuals because they see others talking about their experience. They see others talking about being neurodiverse and they connect with it. And sometimes they feel really ashamed to have that conversation with me because they think I'm going to judge them. They think I'm going to sit there and be like, hey, I'm the doctor. You shouldn't know that. That's a secret code. What are you doing? And instead it's a conversation of, hey, whether that's the diagnosis or not, you connected with it. What did you connect with, right? Why did you watch that video and say, oh my God, that's me? What was it you were relating to, right? And sometimes, especially in things like TikTok, Discord, there can be whole communities that aren't in the mainstream. So it is easier to go ahead and find LGBTQ representation because now we're making webcomics, right? Now we're self-publishing. There are so many people, especially during COVID, who were able to give rise to their own stories that you can now find in Barnes & Noble, in local libraries, right? We have a bigger representation to go ahead and be able to start making some of those stories because we didn't see them. And so part of that is being able to represent how all of that plays into the identities our individuals may have, right? They may not know to explore their identity because they don't see characters who do that. They don't see people who aren't in heteronormative, cisgendered situations, so they have no idea that there's any other option. They don't know what it's like to have an IEP or a 504 at school because what character focuses on that, right? We don't want a character to be disabled, right? That's not what we want. But then we're leaving out all the individuals who do live with disabilities, you know? One of my favorites, and I think I might even have it in here, is talking about D&D and talking about a combat wheelchair. Have any of you heard of that? What happened? So it was an individual who went ahead and in order to play D&D, there's often this idea of like, oh, obviously you'll want to play a character who can walk, right? No, that's part of their identity. That's something they're not ashamed of. They're not upset about it. So let's make D&D accessible. Yeah, combat wheelchair. Let's figure out how we go ahead and make that happen, you know? Getting to have that kind of representation, getting to have characters who, you know, are living with disabilities and that not be something that is an issue, right? They don't need to make disadvantaged roles. We don't need to go ahead and have that be something that is a hindrance because that is part of their identity. That is part of their lived experience. And so being able to go ahead and start working towards a world where there is more equity rather than just getting them back to baseline of normativity, right? So all of that plays into the fandoms. All of that plays into what we connect with, where we are trying to look, and where we're trying to go ahead and find ourselves in this big, wild, scary world. Do you have anything you wanted to add? So, kind of touching on those a little bit, sometimes bad representation is worse than no representation, right? So, a lot of times when we are looking at things, we may have never interacted with this before, right? There may be a person who has a lived experience. I have not met very many people from other countries. So a lot of how I view all of that is going off of news broadcasts or, I watch BBC, stuff like that. But obviously everyone does not walk around like Doctor Who, and that's not... I was really disappointed to find out that there is not just a million David Tennants. I had really...
Blue box somewhere?
There's not. And when you
I'm
go...
so sad now.
When you go into one of those telephone boxes, it is just a phone. It's the most disappointing thing ever.
It's not big
you
room
don't...
inside?
It's not. It's very tight, very confined. It's a horrible experience.
You just ruined my day.
I apologize. There'll be grief counseling after. I do apologize. So ultimately, a lot of times, how we view the world, how we interact with parts that we aren't able to go ahead and interact with is through representation, right? I alluded to the 4 kids censorship and things like that went on because in a lot of cases, they changed entirely what was actually happening, right? There's the really horrific one where Ash eats a giant sub sandwich instead of going ahead and eating a rice ball, and it was just, didn't even animate right or anything like that. There's also Brock's Jelly Donuts. That was pretty weird. And, the Green Ranger, how that all goes and everything like that, it doesn't, not great. And, of course, the infamous Sailor Moon, right? Where they were just, they're just cousins, and in history, they'll be best friends, right? Because, of course, we cannot have, they were roommates. They were roommates, right? We're gonna sit here and just, oh, my dearest, I love you so much as a best friend. That is definitely what it is. I was not talking about running away and leaving my husband for you at all. Not what's happening. So the more we look at these things, the more we go ahead and look at how bad representation can be harmful, right? Going ahead and having something that would have completely normalized things, right? It would have gone ahead and been like, hey, these are just facts about this character, right? This is not our token character. This is not a character who is gay and that is the only aspect and reason we have them here, right? They're parts of their identity. They're parts of the character, but they're not the part of the character. So being able to look at how that representation changes and how that goes ahead and helps the individuals we work with. Because sometimes in this world, we are working with individuals who cannot find themselves. I have an individual I work with, he's a transgender man, and when we talk about stories, when we talk about games, he cannot find himself. So part of what he does is he writes. He writes the stories. He lives out the experiences he wants to through the characters he creates, which is just as valid as, all of the media we consume, because that is still how he interacts with the world. He is still trying to find his way of getting to go ahead and find little bits of himself. So we also now, as we are getting better representation for even, people of color in, movies, in games, TV shows, stuff like that, we are going ahead and we are seeing more kids who get to have characters they can dress up as for Halloween, right? We just had Halloween pass. We see cosplayers and things like that. We have a whole bunch of people who can finally say, this character looks like me, right? I get to go ahead and celebrate my hair because it's not a problem. It's not an issue, right? This is someone who gets to go ahead and do that. I know if anyone has played the Spider-Man 2 game, there's a new suit for Miles where he actually has his hair sticking out, right? And there's a whole bunch of people who are like, that defeats the purpose of Spider-Man, like his identity is supposed to be hidden. But at the same time, it's celebrating his hair, which is really important for him and really important for his culture and his heritage, right? So getting to go ahead and see how there are things like that where, yeah, sure, you're not the target audience, you're not who it's for, but for the person that it is, that is so much more important, and that representation is so much more important and crucial than for the people it's not for, right? plenty of people get plenty of representation every day long. Obviously, as a woman, there is tons of that has happened for men, and that is not to say it is bad, but getting to go ahead and kind of find where those stories are being told by women, getting to see where those stories are being told by people of color, right? Getting to go ahead and see how LGBTQ individuals and communities are getting to go ahead and tell their stories without globalizing their stories, right? No individual is responsible for the whole experience. They do not get to be the Lorax and just go ahead and say, yes, I speak for everyone. Like, this is collectively what we all do, because that is the other thing here too, is that representation is meant to give us an idea, give us a starting point, giving us a conversation, because maybe they walk in the door and they're like, that's the worst thing I have ever seen and I hated it. All right, maybe I loved it. We can totally have a conversation about what you didn't connect with, what made you disconnect? Where did you stop? Where did they lose you, right? Being able to talk about those things.
I think that's a big thing to look at too, right? What are we not connecting with? Because sometimes we can get powerful things come out from that, right? Why do we not connect with this? Why are we having such a negative reaction to this? And it opens up doorways to talk about things in different ways than just talking about what we appreciate and what we connect with, right? Because maybe we connect with that because of that negative part of the story, right? Our fandom. And that's as much of our identity as the positive part.
All right, so go back. So getting to have a discussion like that, right? You guys have raised your hands, you guys have said that you've gotten to have these conversations. So what has some of this looked like? What are some times where you've been challenged with fandoms? Maybe it was something you didn't understand. Maybe it was something that you felt a completely different way, right? I will totally be honest first. I have seen the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, and honest opinion, I didn't like it. I have had so many individuals who were like, I loved it, it was great, it was everything I hoped for. I saw Willy's Wonderland 2 years before, and like that was so much better. He didn't even have to talk. He didn't even have to talk. No lines, deserves an Oscar, but that's my soapbox. Anyway. Right? Yeah.
That was the Black Widow.
So with those types of things, right, obviously, as therapists, as mental health professionals, one of the core things that we learn is that we are not supposed to exist in the room, right? We are not supposed to go ahead and self-disclose. We are not supposed to go ahead and tell anything about ourselves. And if clients know too much about us, that is a problem, right? They are not supposed to perceive us. We just kind of exist there. So being able to walk this line of, if you have your room decorated, if you have these things, if you go and say, oh, you saw the FNAF movie, what did you think? And they say, oh my God, I loved it. And I just have to sit there and be like, really? Are you sure? Because I've been holding out hope that someone's going to tell me they didn't like it so that we can at least feel validated. But getting to go ahead and see, what did that mean to people? Because for a lot of the individuals I work with, they're a little bit younger, and FNAF got them through COVID. So it did not matter how much of a train wreck that movie was going to be. It held a special place in their heart, so it was going to be fantastic, right? All of us have our comfort things. I'm an anime fan. I've watched Fruits Basket. It is not great, but I love Fruits Basket. Like, you can't change my mind. You can't tell me that it's trash. Like, Toradora is a million times better, but Fruits Basket holds a special place in my heart, and no one can convince me otherwise. Even if I can acknowledge it is trash. Like, it is not great, right? People have watched Sword Art Online. They will also tell you, don't do it, but they have all still watched it, right? So being able to go ahead and understand these things. Wednesday Addams is another example of this, where Addams Family, near and dear to my heart. I have gone ahead and watched all of it, watched the old show, and then Wednesday happened, and I was like, that would have been fine as a completely separate show, right? It was not what I expected, right? It wasn't my lived experience. So in having a discussion, what do some of these things look like for you guys now? How have you interacted with fandoms, with your individuals, whether it's things you both connect with, whether it's things you disagree with? What does some of that look like for any brave souls who volunteer?
What was the question?
What has interacting with fandoms?
ADHD delegation.
Oh, right, over there.
You're welcome.
So the question for anyone who did not hear or spaced out or anything like that, non-judgmental, we all do it, it's totally fine. So for the question is, what does it look like to interact with fandoms with clients? Whether it's fandoms you connect with, so you both share, someone comes in and talks about Ghostbusters, what's happening, right? Versus
I'm having the best day of my life.
versus
400 times, absolutely.
versus someone comes in and tells you they hate Ghostbusters.
We're gonna have to do a sorry, you're busted in the track.
So what does that look like for you guys? I know you had your hand up and I saw. What do you want to say?
So for me, I'm interested in the person or family that I'm working with. So even if I'm not interested in what they're interested in, my interest in them is what drives it. So I don't have to like what they like, but buying into them. Yes, I'm team you.
Yeah.
What makes you tick?
Yeah.
You love that? Awesome. What do you love about it? Tell me more. And then, every now and then, something that I wasn't crazy about because I didn't see it a certain way. Midi-chlorians, a dude, explain, and I'm like, you know what? I can kind of see that. And so I used to know everything, and now that I don't know everything, learning stuff can be cool.
It can. I can't tell you how many times I have heard stories about Roblox. It is a wild world out there, and I can't tell you the number. Finding out that Roblox actually has real horror that I have to consider, that's wild.
I have a 11-year-old
I've seen that one too.
who plays Roblox, I wouldn't understand any of it. So I connect with that.
So
You wanted to say something?
one of the things that I just want to know is, like, we all agree that fandom is a big part of some people's identity, and it's a way to have an identity. So I think maybe by thinking of it as a language that you can then reach level and communicate directly with a person on, and it's going to be different for everybody in different fandoms. You don't necessarily need to have a native language.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be yours. It's not your fandom, but you can, as long as you can get into the base level of it and come
And
to
you
a
make a
thing.
good point, like culture has, and essentially that's what we're talking about, we're talking about cultures. Cultures have things that we all can connect with, and each culture kind of overlaps with things.
Sure.
And we can connect in some way with some of these things, and see them in a way where, and try to relate enough to try and talk to our clients in a way where it feels like we're trying to connect with them in a higher level way.
You also had something.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I use it as a tool to really warm a patient up. Like
Okay.
if I have a patient that's really closed off, they don't really want to talk, I find out what they like, what they're passionate about, and suddenly their whole expression changes. Like suddenly they're more engaged than I've ever seen them. And I just bring that in, and then I can learn, kind of like open it as a door for them talking about other things.
Yeah.
And once we've talked about that fandom and that passion, they're warmed up, they're ready to talk, they're feeling more comfortable and like really engaging in the therapy, which is really awesome.
Yeah.
Another way that I like to use it is, let's just say they've had a bad day. And I've had some patients, they come into therapy and they're just incredibly irritable or just really not in a good mood. If I can help them to bring back the fandom and what they love, that irritation starts to melt away.
Yeah.
And then they start to be able to talk a little bit more about that stress and release that in a really healthy therapeutic way.
Yeah. All the way in the back. Did you have one?
Yeah.
And then I'll bounce
Your
to you.
question you were talking, and leading up to it, you're also talking a little about what about our identities and our family, how do they exist in that space. I find that I use it as modeling.
Yeah.
Because I do a lot of therapeutic tabletop role-playing games in my day job, and in session 0, when I'm going through and following the Bodhana model on getting to know what their interests, what kind of stories they want to tell, stuff like that. I'll often ask them, so what kinds of story constructs do you guys into? What genres do you like? What themes do you want to explore? What media has been meaningful to you? And I get a lot of, I don't know.
No one knows boundaries till you hit it. Like,
So what I'll do is I'll even, earlier I said, Kingdom Hearts, big fandom, woo woo. I will share with them. I love Kingdom Hearts. I'll even go to my office and I'll like the 4 posters and 2 props and like all the things there. And I go, I love this story. And here's why. And I'll talk about the themes of friendship.
yeah,
The light that never goes out, of the connections that we make and how that forms our identities and gives us place in the world, et cetera, all those things that I've resonated with through the story to give them an example of this is how consuming these stories can be meaningful to us. And even in just sharing that, I start seeing all the recognition come on their faces and I go, oh yeah, I was reading this one book that I liked. It was this, and this, and because I saw myself in it, and I'm like, ah.
there we go.
So, yeah.
Yeah, you've had your hand up, and then I'll jump over here to you.
Kind of bouncing off both the last two, I think it's something where, for me, it's very much a method of communication with people, and also like communication and connection that I think can be gained very quickly and very securely, to some degree, or at the very least, something where there's a decent chance that people will see me not only as a therapist, but also as a human that they can talk to.
Yeah.
I think it might just be kind of the supervisors I've had, my personal experiences, but I think it sometimes it's over discounted the degree to which the human connection really makes the therapeutic relationship happen. And to my understanding, it's something that where my identity as someone who is, a nerd,
Yeah.
has actually been like something helpful for me in my profession in that I recently got a referral and evidently somewhere along the line somebody had already let the client guardian know like, yeah, this therapist plays video games. And the guardian was like looking at that as a selling point in terms of
Yeah.
okay, this person might be able to connect more with my child in a way that they'll actually, click in some way.
Yeah.
100%. It's about that rapport building, right? And making a connection with the client to make them feel safe and comfortable.
I can't tell you the number of times I have met with a parent and they were like, oh my God, you have blue hair? That's great. They're going to love you, right? The amount of times that just something that was completely all for me. Like, this was not a, yes, I'm going to get the secrets to therapy. Like, you'll all open up. Blue's just my favorite color. Like, it's not that deep. Like, it's just my favorite color. And I decided, if I was going to dye my hair, might as well have fun with it. So, going ahead and doing that. And I have so many individuals who, even something as simple as me having silly blue hair feels less judgmental. Right? It feels like, oh, you have blue hair. You can't possibly judge me. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I probably can't. So being able to have those things, I know you also had something too, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, like,
It's okay. You're in a safe place.
but my office, the way your mouse is very much like a general practice. It's very calm, very soothing, whatnot. And they walk into my room and it's like someone's toy box exploded. There's like a wall of pops and different stuff. And I've got all sorts of stuff I like, but some things that I've like given or people have gotten me
Yeah.
that I put up there and they're like, oh, what do you know about Squid Games? And I'm like, nothing. That's fine. Someone got it. Tell me, what do you recognize that? What's that about?
Yeah.
Like, trying to connect with that. And kind of using that as more of like a selling point of like, okay, I can be here to help you, but it's okay that we talk about some other things. It's okay for you to kind of deviate and use some of that. Some kids I find like they really want to get into certain games, but because of financial constraints, they don't have that system where they can't get that game.
Yeah.
So one thing I've been using is like finding people who do playthroughs online, being like, you should go watch this person. They're doing this, like experience the game that way. I had someone one time who was really having a hard time connecting with their kids because their kids play video games, and they're like, that's just not my thing. I'm like, okay. So I want you to go on, and they like movies. And I'm like, all right, I want you to go watch someone's playthrough of God of War. 2016.
Cinematic masterpiece.
Story ever. Like, I was going through some stuff with my daughter in separation. I'm like, I'm a terrible father. And I'm playing this, and I'm like, I'm okay.
We had someone over here.
I think it's kind of to to what you were speaking to, this idea that being a nerdy or weeb therapist is actually a real asset when we're also given so much messaging, say like in graduate school, like you do not self-disclose, the therapist isn't in the room, you don't exist, you don't have an identity, you don't have interests, and like that was like drilled into me. And like to this day, even well post licensure, all that, I still struggle like when to appropriately self-disclose. And yet I have people coming to my office, parents bringing their kids in, or being like, hey, your therapeutic profile says you like anime, please talk to my child. Or like in my office, I'm like this token weed therapist, and it's really weird. Like people, like I would say that probably most of us are in that kind of like very general clinic, right? So people will roll up in my room and be like, Maggie, my kid said they watched this anime. Do you know it? I'm like, no.
Tell me about the animus.
Right? What is like anime? What is an anime? What? They're watching this manga. What is that? And I'm like, okay.
They called me a baka.
And so like I have to like almost do, and I've had to be in that like educational place. Like here is how you use this. Also here's what a wiki is. Have fun. Educate yourself.
Yeah.
But that self-disclosure still like brushes up so much, and I feel like I am entering the space too much, and it's wrong to bring in my own fandom identity. And at the same time, I got a transfer where this young woman had been working with another therapist, and I'm not throwing anybody under the bus.
Yeah.
But I looked at her chart following this transfer, and it was all like neurodivergent issues, fixations, obsessive behavior, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, this sounds really judgy. And doesn't this child roll up into my office, like shaking, holding an anime doll? And isn't it one of my primary fandoms? Isn't it like
the
best
best?
Thing? And I was like, good God, man, you've got to self-disclose. Like you have to. You've got to create that safety for her. Your self-disclosure is appropriate. It's like this little if this, then that. If not that, then this.
Yeah.
Self-disclose.
Especially when dealing with that much anxiety, right?
Right.
How are you going to connect if you can't
acknowledge that
safety?
she brought her doll to session, and that doll is welcome, and I know exactly what that doll is, and we are of course going to talk about that. And it opened the door not just for her to be so much safer in session and know that she could talk all about her special interests. I could then go to the parents and be like, look, this isn't going to change. Your child's on the autism spectrum. She's going to like anime characters, and she's going to be very, very focused on them. What we need to work on is actually over here, and let me provide some psycho-ed on what's happening here, because like, I'm not going to treat that your kid's into anime, because spoiler, I am too. But like, let's talk about
grow out of
other
it.
issues and why that's brushing up something for you.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't have happened if that self-disclosure wasn't so necessary. So I think this idea of fandom and identity is so challenging because we have identity. We resonate with this stuff. But you're not supposed to have identity in the therapeutic room. So it's like teasing out that line, and it's so necessary.
Yeah. We'll go ahead and take one more.
Well, in schooling, they hammer, the separation, but then what do they also say? What's the number one predictor of positive therapeutic outcome?
Relationship.
The relationship.
Rapport.
Yeah. So I don't even worry about a blurry line. I mean, I am constantly aware of, am I disclosing because I have something that I need to work out?
Yeah.
Or am I trying to normalize, to share vulnerability, to make this a safe space to communicate that, hey, you're not alone? And that, I think, is the value. That's really what you guys are talking about here.
There's a difference between disclosing information of yourself and celebrating the family and connecting with the family. Because if you're connecting, that's the if we are like the ghost of therapy, and I'm just here so you can talk at me, and then I'll give my knowledge at the end. That's not going to work all the time, and it works with some people, and that's great. Like it works for who it works with, but when you have people who are that have issues that only connect with this one thing, and it seems like you're obsessed with this thing because this is the only thing that I see myself in, then you have to try to connect, right?
So the idea here, right, we've talked a lot about fandoms and everything, is going beyond the rapport building phase, right? That's the low-hanging fruit. It's easy to go ahead and just be like, tell me what you like, right? That's where we start all the time. So the idea, right, is to be able to use fandoms, use identity through the whole process, right? Because identity and fandoms aren't a therapeutic approach, right? They're not a modality all of themselves yet, maybe, we'll see, but it's something that can be incorporated whether you are a CBT therapist, whether you're a play therapist, whether you use ACT therapy, DBT, you know, any of them, right? Whatever ones we want to throw out, there is something to connect with, right? There is something to explore. Sometimes it is being able to look at, well, how did this character handle this, right? Sometimes, you know, if we play role-playing games, we know about that separation. We know about bleed in and bleed out, right? How much I connect with a character, how much I take back from that character. Sometimes it is easier for me to talk about how this character's really anxious about a test that they've been studying for, and they just don't think they're gonna pass it, and we're not talking about the character. We're not talking about what's happening in the anime. We're not talking about the fact that Naruto really wants to be the Hokage and he wants the whole village to acknowledge him, because it's not about Naruto, right? Being able to incorporate it through our whole entire process, being able to have it be something. One of the things I have on the next slide that is usually one of my favorite techniques is grounding, right? I love to go ahead and do lists. That is personally one of my favorites. It is also one that I love to do with my clients, because my favorite thing is to look at them and, you know, given the example of Pokemon, name starters for me. And they just go off. Sometimes you'll have ones who are just going all over. Every now and again, you get the ones who are definitely going from each generation. And, you know, being able to be like, all right, give me ghost type, give me dragon type, give me fairy type, right? And I do that usually without explaining the exercise, because then I love to ask, what were you thinking about? And they're like, whatever you asked. And I was like, yeah, that's the point, right? Being able to go ahead and highlight, because to the point of modeling, sometimes it is through lived experience. Sometimes it is through being able to experience those things that we're like, oh, I can actually feel calmer when I just kind of run through a quick list in my head and then figure out whether I need to deal with this anxiety or not, right? Because ultimately, anxiety, anger, all of these emotions are not good or bad, they just are, right? Being able to go ahead and use the media they interact with, use the stories they interact with, right? Characters who have lost their families and everything and don't deal with their trauma, right? They just run from it, run from it, run from it. If anyone is a Neil Gaiman fan and has read American Gods, Shadow is a prime example of that, because Shadow just says yes to everything, and it's not till the end, slight spoiler, that he actually has to deal with the fact that there's a lot of trauma going on, right? On the flip side of that, I am a huge Persona 5 fan, and I have gone ahead and looked at that from the perspective of ACT therapy, right? Joker demonstrates radical acceptance as he's just like, oh, this is life. All right, cool, right? He's not running from it. He's not hiding from it. He says, yes, this is my calling. I'm going to do it. These adults suck, right? And goes ahead and does all of that. And so being able to have those stories, to have those things that exemplify that. As we've gotten further into games, right, we have Baldur's Gate, which is basically just D&D for people who haven't played D&D, but it's ways for people to get to go ahead and have it and not have all the scheduling issues. So they still will face rejection because Asterion doesn't like anyone, but getting to go ahead and have those experiences in safer ways, getting to go ahead and have, hey, if this didn't go well, right? One of my favorite examples is you just tried to punch somebody and now you want to persuade them. That's not happening, right? You tried to punch them, they're not going to be persuaded. That's just not happening. And so being able to use this past just the rapport building, right? We can model these things. We can look at these stories. We can look at things. Sometimes, depending on the stories they're in, it may be appropriate to make recommendations, right? May be appropriate to be like, hey, you know, you've really connected with this. Do you know anything about this, right? Let's look at this together. I have gone ahead and done things. I have one client, they're struggling in school. We did coloring, and they looked at me and said, hey, can we do a David Bowie coloring sheet next week? And I was like, I sure can try, right? So finding those things, because sometimes even if it's in the other approaches, right? Even if it's looking at thoughts, feelings, actions, right? How did this character think about this? What do you think they felt in that moment, right? Being able to have it be something tangible. Because ultimately, our work is dealing with the intangible. If you tell someone to think about their thoughts and they have never done that before, that is a daunting task. Because I don't know, they just happen, right? I've never had the introspection to think about my thoughts. Like, it's kind of a running dialogue in there. I don't know what's happening. So being able to take it past just building rapport, right? That's a great way to start. That's a great way to show them this is a safe space. This is a space for them and things like that. It's also great to go ahead and have families be invited into that. Say, hey, honestly, a lot of these things can change if you give them 5 minutes to just ramble. I have no interest in most of the things I hear about Roblox, but I will sit there and hear all of it and try to piece it back together. And so being able to go ahead and look at how these themes, how these patterns, these things that people are drawn to, these things that they shy away from, right? Maybe there is a character that really reminds them of someone in their past, and that is really difficult, right? We can talk about trauma and things like that. Obviously, media can be re-traumatizing. Sometimes there are situations where they cannot interact with something and they're not sure why. They just know they can't. So being able to go ahead and explore those things, being able to incorporate that into part of the practice that we're doing. So how it looks in practice, right? I alluded to the list game, one of my favorites. Love to go ahead. I have done it with Disney. I have one individual where I have gone ahead and I've been like, hey, name Disney park rides, and he will do it. Every ride. He'll be like, do you want Magic Kingdom or Epcot or Animal Kingdom? Like, where do you want? We'll go ahead, we'll do Disney movies, and be like, Pixar or Disney? And I'll be like, I guess do Pixar, right? And mind you, this individual is like 10, so he loves Disney, lives, breathes it. It's one of his favorite. I've had other individuals where we talked game theory all the time because it was a really huge thing for them, and they would love to come in and be like, did you see the new MatPat episode? And tell me all about the things they were thinking about. And just the fact that I knew YouTubers that they were interested in was a huge thing, right? Their mom had never seen them light up that way because it was something that they connected with. The individual who loves Disney has been through several other therapists, and this is the first time for 2 years he has been able to stay with me. And that is not to toot my own horn, that is just showing the importance of connection. And we go ahead and we use it all throughout. We have talked about how did Luca handle things. We've talked about turning red, right? Sometimes Disney makes it easy for me when we're going ahead and watching some of this. So getting to go ahead and look at some of those things, getting to go ahead and say, hey, how did this character handle it? Did it go well? Do we think that we like what happened? Getting to go ahead and explore, how would we do it different? If we were in that world, what could we have said to them? What could we have done? How would we help them, right? Sometimes that separation is what they need. We've seen like the Diary of the Wimpy Kid movies, right? Those are things that existed. Those books had just blown up for a lot of kids, and those shaped a lot of what they thought about for middle school and high school, and sometimes it was a little accurate, sometimes it wasn't. And so being able to go ahead and explore that, being able to explore how that goes ahead and relates to them, relates to their experience. Maybe they are a kid who's been awkward and weird and hasn't really figured out their place. I have plenty of adults who are going ahead and dealing with that now because they're like, maybe I just need to mask better. And I'm like, maybe you just don't need to mask, right? Being able to try and find those situations where sometimes it is appropriate. Sometimes we are in a work setting, our job is on the line, and we have to go ahead and figure things out a little bit better. But other times we're with friends, and if they don't like that, they might not need to be there, right? I know that, we talked a little bit, alluded to boundaries, right? If you've done, games and stuff, there are safety tools that you should be using. Lines and veils is one of my favorite ways to talk about boundaries, because if I ask about boundaries, most of the time my individuals are like, yeah, it's something I should have. I don't know how to do it, but I should have it, right? And, I talk to them about the fact that boundaries are kind of like a fence, but you can see it and no one else can. And so a lot of times people are just kind of like walking into this barrier and they don't know why, but for you, that keeps growing because now for you, it's intentional. You have seen that boundary, you have seen that person walk into it, you know that they keep doing it, and it feels so much worse because now it feels like it's on purpose. Even though this person is still like, man, why can't I move forward? What's happening? So lines and veils is one of my favorite ways to talk about boundaries because we'll talk about that with tabletop games, right? Usually people can have at least a few things that are a line for them or a veil for them. For anyone who's not familiar, lines are essentially things that will not be in the game. We are not touching this, not talking about it. It is not okay. A veil is something that can be alluded to. right? It can exist in the world, it can kind of be behind a curtain, I don't want to interact with it directly, but it can kind of exist there, right? And so that's where we can talk about rigid boundaries, permeable boundaries, and more flexible boundaries, right? Because boundaries aren't a one-size-fits-all. Maybe with this person, I'm incredibly close and incredibly comfortable sharing everything, and with this person, I'm not. So those boundaries look different, right? So being able to kind of look at that. Sometimes it's even collaborative gameplay. There are lots of people who go ahead and just having the individual invite you into their world, invite you into Roblox, Minecraft, whatever that looks like, can be a really big part of connecting with them.
So, talking about collaborative gameplay, how many of you have ever heard of the game The Longing? The Longing?
The Longing?
So it is a game where you're playing a little soot demon who is underground, and your king has told you he is going to sleep for like 300 and something days or something like that. And the game moves at real time. You're playing this game waiting, longing for your king to awake so that he can give you something, do something for you. You're not even sure because you've been waiting so long. And we had someone working with a client who was playing this game. They were playing it along with them. The game pretty much talks about depression. You're waiting and you're alone and you're isolating, but then there's these moments in the game where you can draw a picture. And then all of a sudden, you don't realize it. You didn't, because you're not looking at the time all the time. Time sped up. Like 2 days went by. What just happened? And now I do something else. I decorate my room. Oh, time sped up even more. Oh, I'm like doing all these things, and now like, oh wait, I'm not as depressed anymore. Like I can go to the above, like where the sun is, and actually see the sun. It was a very powerful moment for that client and for us as well to see that connection and be able to talk about things in that way. There's a good example of like utilizing collaborative play and connecting with a client. I think there's a lot of things out there that we're not aware of as therapists or individuals, right? That people are connecting with things and we don't know why they're connecting with those things. And this was a great example of that, right? This person was dealing with a lot of depression and didn't know how to explain it and talk about it. But when they played the game and talked about it with their therapist, it was a really powerful moment for them to be able to realize some things that they were doing within their own lives that was very similar to what their character was doing in this game. They were isolating themselves, and they were just not in a good spot. And they started doing things again that they enjoyed and liked, and started to crawl their way out into the sun again, and started to see maybe I need to do these other things, right? Now let's talk about some coping skills. But I think it's a great example of utilizing collaborative gameplay.
Sometimes games can go ahead and help us model things. Has anyone here played Hades? Anyone? Yeah? Hades. Hades takes the tagline, much like any Dark Souls game, you will die. That is the whole point of it, right? Failure is the purpose. Because with Hades, every time you die, there's new voice options. There's new dialogue. You get the story by failing. If you make it all the way through in one shot, which, if so, you are someone I do not understand because I don't know how, but if you do that, you miss out on so much story, so much dialogue, so much character development, because this game rewards you for failing, right? It rewards you. There's more you can learn, there's more you can do because you failed, right? And failure is usually something that is incredibly hard for clients to talk about. I have had plenty of individuals who they mess something up and I'm a failure, right? So being able to have games that reward that, being able to have stories that reward that, things that go ahead and show that it is normal it is okay. There is growth that can happen from it, right? Because a lot of what I talk about with individuals is that progress is not linear. It is not a straight line. It zigzags, it doubles back, it goes all over the place, right? So even when we take a step back, even when we falter, when our coping skills just did not work this time, we can still learn from that, right? I will go ahead and give homework and say, hey, I need you to try this, and let me know whether it worked or didn't. Because even if it didn't work, that is something for us to talk about, right? And being able to look at those kinds of things, being able to look at how the stories we interact with, the things that we connect with, can demonstrate for us that it is okay. Because if I see a character who fails miserably and struggles and keeps going, it's easier for me to. It's easier for me to say, oh, yeah, I could do that. Like, I'm not doing half as important stuff as he is, so I'm good here, right? I can go ahead and I think I'll tackle my homework tonight, right? Instead of going ahead and, trying to save the world and possibly not be able to do that. So being able to go ahead and see how these things can connect through the entire process, right? Especially because sometimes some things end. And so being able to have that be part of the process too, of what can you still take from this? What can be your comforts? What are things that you can use even after therapy is over? Because the goal should always be to get them out. The goal should always be to go ahead and be like, get out of the door, go have fun, don't need me, like that should be the goal. So the more we can go ahead and have them utilize the things in their environment, the things in their world, the things they're already drawn to, right? That's just natural for them. The more we can go ahead and strengthen that therapeutic rapport and that process, because now they can relate to it in a way that isn't all of the psychobabble jargon that we like to use and things like that, because we're speaking their language, right? We're connecting it in that way. I know there were a couple of questions, but you also had something. Then we'll take questions.
So much like zigzagging and going back and forth, my brain works like that. So talking about boundaries again. Boundaries is a talk about because our boundaries change all the time, and we got to make sure that our boundaries aren't okay. We said these are our boundaries and that's it, right? Because we're human and we're gonna change and we're gonna watch something and it might change the way we see something and our boundaries might change now, and especially when we're utilizing like gameplay. Checking in with our things like lines and veils, right? We should do that every beginning of our session to make sure that we're not touching on like the boundaries that we may have created in between. Think about those things of our boundaries.
Which, small little plug, if you have not had enough of us talking, we will also be doing one of staying safe while exploring the unknown with our lovely Tennille as well from the audience. She wasn't a plant, I promise. I did not coach her at all on what she said. So we will be talking more about trauma-informed practice, and safety tools. So if you're like, what's a safety tool? That might be worth going to. Just small little plug, that'll be at 1:30 in the same room. So now at the end of our presentation, I would like to open the conversation for questions, discussions, things like that. I know you had your hand raised first.
Just talking about failure, you see Dungeons and Dragons, maybe things about failure. Aren't you tired of failing? No. I'm the king of failure. You never stop failing because as soon as we do, that's when we fail.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fair. So are there any other questions, comments, concerns? Hopefully don't tell me this was awful. I can't take that. That's not criticism I can take. In the back there.
I have a few, but I think starting out with one that is a little bit more.
Yeah.
So I'm writing a novel, and at the time that I started the novel, I was questioning my gender identity, and the main character is non-binary. I have since determined that, like, reaffirmed to myself, I am heterosexual, cisgender male. But at the time, I started writing the character as non-binary because I was exploring potentially that being part of my identity. With that being said, I'm trying to determine whether to. I've talked extensively with people about it.
Yeah.
And one of the senses I've gotten is like, as long as I'm not writing it about them being non-binary, as long as they're a non-binary character and there's something like egregiously terrible in terms of representation,
Yeah.
then it's okay to have non-binary character, just as long as it's not about their identity, because I can't speak on that.
Yeah.
With that being said, I mean, trying to make sure that that's still not something that I should change. And then also, I don't know, because I'm already like 18,000 words in, but I'm trying to figure out, because I am neurodivergent, and I'm trying to figure out if that should be more like a part of their character and potentially more a part of their character, because a lot of it is, so for a lot of it is really challenging, a lot of it is, I'm wondering if that's something that I should incorporate more, because it might help to flesh out my character and help more people feel as though they're seen in a way that I can explore more, given the fact that it is a strong part of my identity as a person. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I get it. No, I totally understand. So with part of that is, of course, the difficult part that there is not a rubber stamp of approval, right? People may love it, people may hate it. That's how it's going to go. But an important part is having those conversations, right? Being able to go ahead and make sure the people who do have that lived experience have a seat at the table. Because also, if this is your journey in your own exploration, even if you still landed on, yeah, no, default is still what's good, that's still an exploration. That's still your lived experience, right? Even people who've questioned sexuality, gender, things like that, that is still part of the experience. And to the point of the neurodivergence, I think the important part there is looking at what are the aspects you're incorporating, right? Is it just, hey, look, my person has ADHD, versus like, hey, they're really struggling and really trying to go ahead and get this done, and nobody understands, and everyone thinks that they're lazy and they're not trying, and they are struggling so hard, right? Going back to the point of self-disclosure, right? The why is important. Why is this a part of it? Why is this part of the character? What are they struggling with? What are they dealing with, right? Because representation, while in an ideal world, is perfect for going ahead and have the individuals with those lived experiences telling those stories, that is not the only way to tell those stories, right? They should have a seat at the table, should have those conversations. That should definitely be a part of it, but it's also looking too at making sure they're not just a non-binary character because, hey guys, I get cool points, right? Being able to go ahead and look at that, because a big part too, which, you know, is a whole side tangent for anyone who's not a social worker, but privilege is a really big part of conversations. In social workers, you will take a whole class on just privilege. And the idea isn't to go ahead and tell you, hey, you have privilege and that's bad, you should feel bad. It's, hey, you have privilege and you should use it, right? You need to recognize that you have privilege, because even just walking into the therapy room, I am a professional and they are not. I have privilege. I have an education that they do not. Even if they went and got a master's, right? Doesn't matter. I have a lived experience that they do not have, and that is privilege. And so being able to recognize those sides of it too, even especially as we're recognizing identity, things like that, we can go ahead and be able to kind of look at, you know, how that all plays out, right? Maybe someone doesn't have access to manga and anime and things like that, but their local library has it. Can we connect it? Can we go ahead and do something like that? Maybe we can go ahead and I can pull up YouTube in my room and we can stream it and talk a little bit about it, right? Being able to have that be accessible. So to your point, I think the really important part is looking at the why, right? Why is this a part of it? Is this just the character's lived experience and part of what's going on, and having those conversations with people too? And then also the other side too is there's not a good right or wrong, right? People like it, people love it, people hate it. It goes both ways. Any other questions? Yes.
I really love this idea of using like our clients' terminology when working with them, especially around especially like in my job. A lot of the clients, by the time they get to me, they were typically like 3 or 4 other therapists.
Yeah.
And we're talking all about 5, 8, 10 years of age. So like it's really like essential to be able to have that language. Right? Like I never would have thought in grad school I'd be explaining like coping skills in Fortnite terms.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing, right? So, like, for instance, like, I can't tell you how many times I've had to have conversations about, like, you know,
coping skills in terms of like Batman and like
Yeah.
utility belt and stuff like
Yeah.
that. I was wondering if like y'all had any particular like analogies or anything like that that you feel like you've drawn upon frequently or been particularly useful or impactful like in your practice.
So part for me is that inherently I'm on TikTok, so I watch a lot of things. So a lot of the language does come more inherently for me. I'm one of those therapists who understands when someone's like, I'm deceased, it is not suicidal ideation. I've heard some horror stories where they're like, yeah, I said that and they thought I wanted to kill myself. I just meant it was a really bad situation, right? Like being able to have some of that. So for me personally, a lot of it is kind of going ahead and looking at the language that they already use. A lot of that happens in the rapport building, not being afraid to be like, ooh, that's a new one. Let me add that to my vocabulary, right? Kind of being able to do that. I know as far as like actual like fandoms and things like that, a lot of it is me going ahead and having them educate me, right? Me having them go ahead and be like, look, I'm sorry, like, tell me a little bit more about that, right? I had one individual who, goes ahead and they were a binder. And, I was trying to figure out issues and stuff like that because they've been dealing with a lot of pain. And I was like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and admit right here, I don't have experience with that. Tell me what it's like so that way we can try and figure out what's realistic. Because I'm not just going to sit here and be like, can't you just like not wear that if it's hurting you? Like, that's not realistic because if that leads to gender dysphoria, that's not happening, right? So being able to, again, be able to learn, be able to listen, be able to hear what they use and how they talk about, because I also have individuals who do not use the terms the way that they actually mean. Like, I have one who will say 69 and be like, haha, nice number. He has no idea why. No clue why.
So one of my favorite things to do is, why don't you tell me what the students got? I don't know. Right? That
Yeah.
sounds interesting though, right? And then getting them to tell you their meaning of whatever that language is, because I come across so many people that one thing means another to the next person, right? And I don't know sometimes what exactly we're talking about. So I need the definition from that, right? And getting it from like that, I think is the best way to go sometimes. Even if you know what it means, just let them tell you what it means from their perspective, and then you can have a discussion from there.
Yeah, sometimes I've even done it collaboratively where I'm like, okay, so this is the piece that I'm working with. What does that connect to for you? And they'll be like, oh, that's just like this. And I'm like, all right, cool. We've got relations now. Like, this equals this, and kind of having that be a collaborative process too, because sometimes you can also make a language there too, right? You can go ahead and work collaboratively to have a way that is communication for you guys, right? Getting to go ahead and do that. I know we had a couple other questions.
So, well, I mean, it kind of piggybacks off of what
Yeah.
you guys are talking right here, and it's a horrible personal issue I have, which is time. And unfortunately, no one has it. I mean,
Yeah.
I keep trying to find more of it.
Yeah.
And so, how can you learn more about a specific fandom to help a client without diving down the rabbit hole yourself? I mean, because
Yeah.
how are you going to learn it all? I mean,
The wiki. Go to
Wiki is fantastic.
It's like your clip notes. Wiki and YouTube. I send therapists in my office, and they're like, "What's a wiki? Is it on Wikipedia?" And I'm like, "No, it is a Wikipedia just for this thing your kid's talking about. Go read the cliff notes, familiarize yourself. If you like it, grab a playthrough on YouTube, but like start with the wiki."
If you have
You can put on playthroughs while you do notes. Like, they're not that intensive.
talking about a specific character that keeps coming up, you just watch a YouTube video.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I
it
knew
explains the
exactly
whole thing. But it's interesting, and you make a good point on that. Time is a factor, right?
There are also sometimes podcasts and stuff like that too, ways to go ahead and kind of have those in. And again, usually my default too is to have them talk about it, right? Have them go ahead and please be the expert, right? That is usually a huge part of my approach is you are the expert on your experience. No matter what I come in with preconceived notions, you're the one who can tell me. So being able to be like, hey, look, I'm not super familiar with that. Like, please tell me about that. Because ultimately, that's still showing an interest in them. And for a lot of the individuals, whether they're kids or adults, they don't get to have interest in them a lot, right? We kind of find that all as just, it's hard to find people who take an interest in us. And so getting to go ahead and share that, getting to connect with that, especially when it's something important, can go a very long way. I'm going to jump over here and then back to you.
Well, that's basically what I was going to say. I mean, therapy, if you think of it from a medical model, is there something wrong that needs to be fixed? And so the people that we're working with are usually hearing, no, that's wrong, do it this way. And and their whole day is compliance or education or focusing on what they're not
Yeah.
good at.
Yeah.
And when they come to us and we're sharing in something that's fun,
Yeah.
we're all more willing to take risks, to stretch when we're in a place where we feel comfortable and confident, and so letting them have an opportunity to say, you're the expert.
Yeah.
You know this. Teach me. And being able to feel that power and control is safe. It's empowering, and it's rapport building, low-hanging fruit stuff too. But it's also how we can, like you said, what does this mean to you?
Yeah.
It's like let me hear. Go ahead and put it out there so I can filter out what's the important stuff.
Yeah.
And you're giving that to me.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's my favorite way. It's like somebody came in, I know nothing about this. Are you going to go have to watch all this now? Nope.
I'm gonna hear it all.
Yep.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome. What about this? How does that work?
Yeah. Making a client comfortable is a really huge thing, to that point of kind of finding where their language is. I've had individuals who have done therapy with me where they stare at the wall and I sit behind them and we don't look at each other. Because eye contact is a barrier. I've had other individuals who want to stare me down because they think that's what I want. I'm like, yo, I don't care where you look. As long as I can hear you talk, as long as you can communicate in some form. I have used text to chat, things like that. If you are communicating to me in some way, I will learn ASL, whatever that looks like. We can go ahead and communicate, because ultimately finding where they can start, right? Meeting them where they are, finding how we can go ahead and bridge that in and make it more accessible is a really big part of this, and that's part of where the fandoms and identity come in.
And also remember, normalize it, right?
Yeah.
They're touches feedback.
Yeah.
That's okay, because then now we're making it a legal playing field, and now it's a comfortable place, right? And that connection now becomes a little deeper.
You had something again.
Well, I was just gonna throw, I love the idea of emphasizing the importance of letting the client be the expert of their own fandom and whatnot, especially the fact of I had a client give me probably a 30-minute spiel on the dare race. Mind you, I've seen a few animes, but terminology, I've learned at least 15 new terms already. But they gave me a 30-minute spiel on the dare race, and they did not line up whatsoever with what you described. Which tells me that A, the knowledge that I thought I had is not accurate, but B, it also tells me a lot about how they perceive them and whatnot else, and how it's a key conversation. So I've been someone that spent 45 minutes going through the wiki of the show, just being like, okay, hold on, I gotta understand this. Partly because I'm kind of interested now, but also because it's therapeutically important. So this is, you gotta do this.
Well, my
I see it as more important than what the real definition is.
Well, and that's just it.
Other communities say.
Yeah.
For sure. With the importance they draw from it may not be anything close to what, I don't know, user 1234 on, the
Yeah.
wiki for whatever.
Yeah. I mean, my personal recommendation is I do have to go back on what we just said, and you do have to watch anime. So it's just, I don't make the rules. It's just how it is. All the way in the back, our last question.
There's going to be a super big add-on.
Yeah.
We're doing a lot of talking about clients, the experts, favorite phrases that my kids in the archetype I work with hear constantly. Help me understand ...
Yeah.
And I love that phrase, because how many adults actually look at the kids and say, help me understand this thing, instead of being questioned. What do you mean? It's
wow, adult wants to know what I want, what I'm into.
Yeah.
They love being smarter than an adult.
Yeah.
This
is what I think I'm perceiving, but I know for a fact that I get. Help me understand. This is what I thought I perceived. Help me understand what this is, or you seem to care about. Help me understand that. And just, I come out really well from that. I love that particular phrase.
Yeah.
You're the expert of your own story, right?
I like the show me how to play, not do it for me. Show me how to do it.
Yeah. So last little bit, I just wanted to go ahead. We will be around after, just outside, because I don't know if they have to use this room or not. But I want to thank you all for coming, for listening to us, for letting us talk and all of that. There are the surveys there that they need to go ahead and have those filled out. I believe they're for the CEs as well. So if you could please go ahead, fill those out. We can collect them in the back. I'll have a nice little folder to put those in. And again, if you want to hear us talk more, we'll be back later in this same room. So it's super easy.